Welcome to the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm your host, Danny Gavin, and together with industry leaders and marketing experts, we'll explore the meeting point of mentorship and marketing. We'll discover how these connections have affected careers, marketing strategies, and lives. Now get ready to get human. This episode is brought to you by Audio Academy. Whether you're a recent high school graduate, a busy mom, a working woman seeking to enhance her skills, or a female entrepreneur looking for a better understanding of digital marketing, we've got you covered. Dive into the digital marketing world without drowning in student loan debt or compromising your values. Visit audioacademy.com/podcast and claim $150 off Audio's women's only cohort of our Digital Marketing Fundamentals career course by entering the code MENTOR at checkout. That's odeoacademy.com/podcast. Empower your career and save $150 with code MENTOR today. Hello, everyone. I'm Danny Gavin, founder of Optidge, marketing professor, and the host of the Digital Marketing Mentor. Today, we have a very special office hours episode with the amazing Jenna Meldrum, who's an account manager at Optidge. Jenna's in charge of client management, making sure that all projects are on track while keeping clients in the loop at all stages. Patient and empathetic, she's the link between the strategist and client. Jenna tackles all her projects with zest and dedication and holds a BBA in employment relations, which I'm going to ask you in a second about. But today, we are talking about successful client onboarding. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here, Danny. I've been waiting to get on this podcast, just itching to get on here and talk about some client things.
We had a couple stumbling blocks in the way, but I'm so glad that you're here today, and we're really looking forward to this. So let's jump right in. Let's talk about where you went to school and your degree. I feel like employment relations is like such a niche degree. Let's talk about it.
Well, it's really just HR, but fancy, I guess. I was on, the fast track to do employment law is what my passion is. My passion is people. And I did start with, a bit of HR in my professional life after university, but starting in, I was doing everything under the sun. I was switching my major constantly because I didn't really know what I wanted. I didn't really have a focus. So I started with archaeology because I just had such a passion for it and an interest in history. And then it turned into geography because I found another passion while following a passion in archaeology that I enjoy, maps and things. So then that turned into something else. And then I eventually ended up taking some time off. Fortunately, it wasn't, fortunately or unfortunately, it really wasn't my choice to take the time off. I was just gifted it, which was really, really special. And it gave me some time to think about exactly what I wanted to do and what can I actually make a living off of too. And, it's important to have hobbies and passions, but it's also important to, think critically about, what will I enjoy doing for the rest of my life? And that's helping people and taking care of people, doing what I can for people, because that really is what definitely gets me up in the morning is, how can I make an impact? So I went into employment relations, was going to get into law eventually, but then I ended up getting an opportunity with a company just doing HR with them. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to try it. I'm going to see where this is going to take me. And I ended up working there for a little while. And the director of marketing, we were working together on an awareness campaign for the company. And he really liked what I was doing. And he offered me a position on his team, which ended up being fantastic. And I realized how much I love marketing. And how I was able to connect that with people was looking at, how can I take care of clients? Right? And clients and focusing on exactly what they need and making an impact there. So I've married the two together in a very special way, which is really a lot to ask of one major for sure.
I don't think I told you this story, but when I was studying for my MBA, I took one of these employment type of tests to see like what I would be good at. And the two areas that I fell into was HR and marketing.
Look at that.
So it makes sense that we jive so well.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, I mean, and to me, like the reason why it made so much sense for both of those, because yes, I also like people. So obviously I decided to go the marketing route. But as you know, like in day to day, especially when you're working in an agency, you're dealing with people all the time. So if you enjoy dealing with people, that's great. If you don't, it might be a little bit hard. Let's jump right into the main topic of today, which is about client onboarding. We're going to talk about how to have a seamless new client onboarding from a discovery call to running your first campaign with a new client. Let's introduce like this concept of client onboarding? What is it? Why is it so important?
Yeah. Well, onboarding really is, that's the first impression that you're getting with an agency and also with the client too. You're really setting the stage for how is this relationship going to work long term? And it can be from anything like long term, meaning if you're only here for an audit or if you're here for the foreseeable future, we want to make sure that you have everything you need and we have everything we need. And we're making sure that expectations are set from the very beginning. And that first impression is so key. Because if you don't start off on the right foot, if things are shaky, if things aren't organized, and that's going to set the tone for the rest of the relationship. So having a successful onboarding is probably one of the key things to a successful ongoing relationship with the client.
And you kind of make me think, like you mentioned, like if there's just an audit, but sometimes we think that it's just a small project, an onboarding isn't necessarily required. But if you think about it, kind of like a point which you just said, is like it's that first touch point. In a way, it's also like a sales opportunity, right? But it's like to really show who you are. So even if it's, let's say, a smaller project, but I think onboarding it's a really good idea.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Like you said, even if it is just an audit, like you are setting the stage for how that relationship is going to go, regardless of how long it's going to be, right? Because yeah, it is an upsell opportunity. Like every time you're meeting with a client is really setting the stage for whatever future could be with them. If they have a bad experience from the very beginning, they're not going to think of you when they need something else, right? But if they have a good experience and they trust you and they feel comfortable with you and the agency and being client focused and client centered, I'm the first line of defense. And if I'm off, then that's really going to show with the client relationship and how well they trust us.
So we know a really big part of a successful client agency relationship is where the expectations are set in a way that both the client and the team, they understand what to expect. So do you have any examples of clients that pushed back on your original attempt of setting expectations?
Oh, yes. I mean, of course, everyone wants to have exactly what they want and what they need. And especially, even after onboarding, there are times where you need to reset expectations. So I've got many examples of that. But just kind of overall, a lot of times people kind of forget what expectations are, especially if they feel very comfortable like in the relationship. If we're doing our job really well, you're going to have those questions of, oh, what is actually in scope and what is out of scope and what are the expectations? You're going to have those questions if you're doing a really good job. So don't be afraid of those questions for sure. Definitely, I've had some clients that have really pushed back on what they are expecting. And in those cases, you just have to handle it with a very level head and come to it with innocence and just be like, you know what? I see that you don't understand what the expectations are. So let's talk about that. And let's see, maybe we do need to change what those expectations are. Because when a client comes to you and is saying, hey, something doesn't feel right, that means that either something was wrong to begin with or something just needs to change. So sitting down with the client, talking through their concerns, whatever issues have arisen since the expectations were set originally, it's important to see how things have changed and see how you can adjust things. And being flexible on that too is very important because, as we said, things do change, right? And the relationships do change. And you have to be flexible with that and be able to adjust to a certain point. Of course, we need to protect our internal team. Our time is precious too, and so is the client. So we need to do something that's going to work for both sides, right? And coming to like some kind of problem solving conversation with a client is sometimes uncomfortable for people if you're not focused on making something work. So sometimes that can be a little daunting, but just getting on a call with someone and being able to talk about their concerns does really go a long way with the client in building that trust and that ongoing relationship with them.
So that's like setting expectations with the client. After you like meet with a client, how do you go about setting expectations with the team? Both like, what they should expect, but especially I guess in a scenario where it might be a more of a difficult client, how do you set that expectations with your team?
When you deal with any people, there's always going to be feelings, and you have to come to that very gently, especially if it has to do with the work that someone's doing or something that someone might have said. Of course, people put their whole heart and soul into what they do, and especially here at Optidge, we do everything with our heart and soul, and we do a lot of really fantastic work. But there's a lot of care that needs to go into those kinds of conversations with the team because you need to make sure that the team is continue to be inspired by the work that they're doing, that this expectation reset does not reflect directly on them. It's a reflection on what has been going on. So it's not a personal thing. It's just, all right, this is the situation. This is what's going on. And these are the steps on what we need to do. So it's important as the account manager or the account coordinator, or if you're leading the team, to come with solutions already in mind. Don't come in a panic. Don't communicate too far in advance, like as it's happening. I think you should let everything be dealt with, or at least started to figure out, having those initial conversations, understand what's going on with the client before you talk to the team, and then let the team know, like, this is what's going on. I've already spoke to the client. This is what they're feeling. These are some solutions that I have. What do you guys think? And then get their buy-in on the changes, and making sure that their expectations are set with the new expectations. And it's a team effort of figuring out what will work.
How do you approach a situation with a client who needs to be reminded of the scope of a project? Do you still feel like nervous? Were you, like, when you first started, was it nervous, but now you have it under wraps? So we'd love to dive into that a little bit deeper.
So I guess when it comes to scope, again, if you're doing the job really well, like, clients aren't looking at exactly what the scope is. So you get that question often, like, oh, is this in scope or is it not? And most of the time it's just innocent. They just want to know exactly what's going on. But then that also gives the opportunity for a bit of an upsell, maybe, like they identify there's something that they need that maybe we're not currently providing that might be new. So you definitely want to get on a call and talk through exactly what that looks like. But then just sharing what the current scope is usually fixes that situation, and the client's usually happy after that. And then we might be doing some more work with them, which is always exciting. The more you can support a client, the better you can support a client. So that's always really great. But then there's always the rare occasion where a client pushes back, expecting that, this should be in scope. Like, maybe if it's a small detail in the service line, possibly, that they want to have happen as well, like adding an additional page on a website design. They think that should be included too, just because it makes sense to them. Those are a little more difficult to handle. And of course, when I first started, that was like my worst fear. It's like, oh no, they're going to want something that they're not already paying for and that we are not providing. So what do we do? And it's not a scary thing. It's just means, again, that there needs to be a conversation about what is in scope, what we're doing, and what we can do to support them too. So not scary, but just a little nerve-wracking sometimes when you do hear from a client that says, hey, I need something and you're not giving it to me. But it's always good to take a step back and say, you know what? This is just them telling me that they need something else, and if we can provide it, let's provide it. If we need to change something, let's change something. Let's make that client happy. It's a lot of just open communication to make sure that the client understands what we can do, and just making sure that they feel heard and supported in what they need.
So I think along those lines, where the client comes with something that's one, situation, but sometimes, the team or, the group that's working on the project realizes, ooh, we have this opportunity to upsell the client, right? Introduce a new service or introduce something new. So how do you handle upsell conversations?
Well, a lot of the times it does come from people asking, like, what is in scope, and then we help them. Additionally, we help them support them a little more. So those are the fun ones. That's easy, and that really helps build that knowledge and like that Rolodex of like things that you can say to help upsell in a situation, especially if you're not a salesperson like myself. But in those situations where it's kind of on a call, clients are asking about things and they want to add something on, or there's an opportunity that the team's brought, like you said, if the team's brought something, of course, we want to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row. We want to make sure that we're showing exactly how this can benefit them and why it can benefit them and how it can go in partnership with what we're already doing. And I think that's a very key thing, is to show them this is going to improve what we're doing, to help them see how it can improve their company overall. And coming from a standpoint of, we're here to support you. We want what's best for your company, I think is the best way to start an upsell conversation, especially one that isn't started by the client.
Have you ever had a client like push back and be like, hey, like, why are you upselling me? Well, I pay a lot of money to you. Why do you want more? Have you ever had like a negative reaction?
Sometimes that does happen, and sometimes you'll see clients get very upset because they don't want to spend any more money, especially if they have a large budget and they're already spending a lot, of course. But in those situations, it really does come back to, we just want to support you. We see this as an opportunity. We wanted to give this information to you so that you can make an informed decision for your business.
You've got different extremes, but kind of the same feeling. So like if someone's paying $1,000 a month, and now you're offering them, hey, we've got this really cool new thing we know it's going to help you and hey, it's going to be another 1,000, that's a big jump, right? So that in a way, that's like a scary conversation. But on the other hand, if someone's paying like $15,000 a month and then they're adding something which is out of scope and it's going to be $500, that's also a little scary because then it's like I'm already spending 15. Why do I need to spend another 500? So
yeah, that's a massive percent increase in budget, which is harder to sell. Definitely. So that's why you need to come with all of your ducks in a row. Like I said, you have to come with your reports, your analytics, like your expected projections, right? And just come confident in what the new strategy is going to be. And of course, like it's not I'm not a salesperson. So I usually will invite other people who are, experts, right? You don't have to do it alone. And you also don't have to have all the answers right away. It's okay to say, you know what, I'm not entirely sure what that would look like. Why don't I take that back to the team and we'll come back to you with a full report with exactly what that will look like, which clients are usually very happy to, wait to get more information than to have, something half done.
Ladies, are you seeking a flexible, satisfying, and well-paying career? Do you resonate with psychology, excel with words, and brave the tech world effortlessly? Digital marketing might be your calling, and our women's only cohort at Odeo Academy is tailored to you. Learn the ropes without a four-year commitment, without compromising on your values, and without leaving the comfort of your home. Our course is designed to support women from high school grads to business mavens in launching their digital marketing career. Check out audioacademy.com/podcast. And don't forget to use the code MENTOR at checkout for a special $150 off. Act fast. Our Digital Fundamentals career course begins October 29th. Remember, it's odeoacademy.com/podcast. Claim your $150 discount with code MENTOR today. Talking about bringing in experts. So obviously being an account manager, you have to know a little bit about everything. How much does an account manager need to really understand the ins and outs of the services that the agency's provided in order to properly manage expectations, properly, guide the project, guide the relationship with the client?
As an account manager, you need to know the processes inside and out. I would say that just having a surface level of what the team does day to day would not be enough. You don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs and the whys of the strategy, but you do need to know all the parts and the components that go together to make the strategy. Because we have fantastic strategists that know exactly the whys and the hows. And my responsibility is to make sure that that's all communicated properly, but not necessarily that I need to know the whys behind it. But in understanding your client, I think that's probably the most important thing outside of knowing processes. If you know your client and their goals, you'll understand the strategy. You won't need to worry about that. But understanding the process itself is the most important thing. Because then when you're talking with clients about what they need to expect for timelines or for, expectations on projections for, their results, that's important to understand too. So understanding our process as well will help in the client understanding and trusting that you know what's going on. And that, I think, is the key thing to building that relationship with clients, especially during the onboarding phase of communicating what's going to happen and then seeing that result actually happen. Not so much the result with, the campaigns, because you can't really promise anything there. You can just say what, we've seen before and what we expect to happen, but expecting certain things in the process of building the campaigns and launching the campaigns is something that the team and the account manager needs to be able to communicate to the client so they feel safe.
So you've mentioned communication quite a bit.
Oh, yes.
So we're going to dive a little bit deeper, get a little more specific. So different clients prefer different communication mediums, frequencies, and presentation. How do you handle all the different preferences, especially if you're managing 5 to 10, maybe more projects?
Well, the great thing about it with technology is that you can have all different modes of communication on one screen at one time. And it goes back to knowing your client too. So if your client is going to respond to you better on WhatsApp, you're downloading WhatsApp, right? If they're not going to respond to you on email, then, there's no point in emailing them anything because you're not going to hear back from them. So WhatsApp is where to go. There are certain boundaries that I have when it comes to certain communication types and platforms. I usually don't give out my personal phone number, one, because I don't have it connected to my hip at all times. And that really is the worst way to contact me. But also because, I have off hours, and a lot of these clients that we work with, this is their personal business. Like our point of contact isn't always someone from the marketing department, right? It's the owner of a company. So I do have those kind of boundaries a little bit when it comes to that, because we do have business hours and that kind of changes a little. But when it comes to like inside of business hours, just managing like where clients are, like if they're in Slack, making sure that you're connecting with them and also communicating what the expectations are for communicating with us is a really good thing. So it's important to let clients know in onboarding how frequently you're checking your messages, like when to expect responses, what to do when something's urgent versus something that is just a question, especially like when something is urgent and, we've got lots of urgent things happening. We want to make sure that we're triaging appropriately. So sometimes we need the client to help us out a little bit there too, just communicating what is urgent to them. So including urgency in your messaging is also very important, regardless of what platform you're communicating on. But balancing where you're finding different communication from clients, just making sure that you're regularly checking in all of those spaces. And it becomes second nature once you start looking in a bunch of different places. I've got a couple emails for a bunch of different clients and different platforms. And then we have Slack and we've got WhatsApp and you've got who knows what else. But there are definitely a lot of ways to communicate, and finding out what works best and is going to move the needle on what's happening with a client account or a client project is what is most important.
And I think setting those expectations with the communication channel is really important, right? Because like sometimes when you open up yourself to WhatsApp or even to Slack, because it's such an immediate platform, the clients expect immediate responses. So sometimes it's kind of a hard balance where it's like, okay, we'll give you access to Slack, but do note that it still may take us, one business day to get back to you. What do you think about that? Like, do you think it's possible to like give someone a present that ideally they're expecting to get immediate response, but then at the same time have some expectations where, things might not be immediate? Like, do you think you're setting up the relationship for failure, or is it actually like something, is it something to consider, something good to do?
I think it's something good to do, but it does depend on the client. And it's not something that I would recommend for every client, especially if it's a client that sometimes can expect more than what we're able to provide when it's a little uncomfortable in those expectations. If you have to reset expectations with a client multiple times over the same thing, then don't put them in a immediate response kind of platform. Keep them in email, keep them at arm distance so that you can have time to work on the projects that they're asking you to work on. I think that otherwise, I think it's great to have clients in a very quick medium like that, especially with Slack. I think that it's fine, but it's all about the expectation setting and the type of client. Because again, what's most important is making sure that you can get those quick responses and move the needle on projects, right? Because we don't want to be held up. The client doesn't want to be held up. If you have a client that is really good with communication and understanding that things do take time and they're reasonable with it, then definitely add them into Slack. But if they are, a little more hands-on and need a little more expectation resets, I would recommend leaving them in email.
Yeah. And we've gone through some clients where we've given them Slack access, we've set expectations, and it hasn't really worked out. And we've actually had to remove that. Kind of uncomfortable, but
yes.
But I think what's cool is at least we tried it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we tried it, we saw if it would work, tried it a second time, but then it's okay, right? It's okay to change the communication method. And I think that actually helped the relationship because then we basically provided the right medium for the type of individual.
Yeah. And I think it's always worth a try. Like, even if you do have one of those clients that do need expectations reset, this might be the thing that does it, right? So it's worth trying and making sure that the client feels heard. And maybe what they need is to be in one of those quick medium platforms where they can message quickly and they know that you're going to respond.
So Jenna, how do you deal with those clients where you send them updates, you send them reports, and they just don't get back to you? And you have to remind them a second time, a third time. It seems so frustrating. How do you deal with that?
There's a lot of things that you can do to create some urgency with clients, especially if it's something like reports. Of course, we want them to review them, but usually we'll send them in advance of a meeting and we go over them in the call and we talk about, any questions that they have and explain the whole thing to them. And we send Loom videos with the reports as well. So that really helps answer a lot of questions. So there are some times when you aren't going to hear from a client on something, and that's okay. Because you will have a touch point with them later. So those are usually fine. But when it comes to something that's like, hey, we need to verify your account, and we only have a couple days to do it. Well, a month or so to do it. And they're not returning any of your messages, your phone calls, or anything like that. It does get a little frustrating because you know that the campaigns are going to be paused and the client wants you to make sure that you can continue to run ads. And it comes down to us, right? It's our responsibility to make sure that it's done. So that means for me that I will be messaging you. I will be spamming your inbox until we get what we need. And I'm comfortable with that. Some people aren't. Some people like to give a lot of space. I like to give space where space is required, but less space when it's required. So things like that are urgent, you spam everything, send a carrier pigeon, fly there, do what you need to do to get what you need. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many times you message, it just needs to be done.
Yeah. And really the client does appreciate it because, the opposite where like there was something really big and you didn't even say anything, like that's so much worse, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I never, like, that's my worst fear. Like my career worst fear is that there was something that we should have said and we didn't. That I never want to hear that from a client that, this was happening and you didn't do anything about it. That's why I love to message in all different platforms, because I'm like, nope, we're gonna get you somewhere.
Yeah. And, it reminds me of kind of like how I, in a way, motivate my colleagues or, we kind of talk about is you always want to be in the position where you've done everything that you can, that you're chasing after the client instead of the opposite way around. If the client is chasing you, that's the worst situation. We'd rather be doing more than we have to and overwhelming the client. I'd rather do that than the opposite where we're doing too little and they have to chase us.
Exactly. And I 100% agree with that. And that just goes back to the client that we had in Slack, that we were trying to make that work. We did everything that we could. And at the end of the day, that's what we can say is that we tried everything to make that relationship work. And it didn't work in Slack. So we tried something else, but we feel good about the amount of work that we did.
So there are certain accounts that likely don't warrant regular communication simply based on the level of the financial investment. So how do you ensure you're keeping in touch at a regular enough cadence with those types of clients without spending too much time as to be unprofitable?
Well, we have some automations that are set up. We like to do as much as we can inside of the budget. And we want to make sure that every client feels like they are our only client, regardless of your ad spend. Because if we're taking you on, we care about you. So it's important to find ways around spending lots of time on these types of updates. So the more automated that you can make them is fantastic. And the more that you can have, additional support from the team is also great, because part of my job as a client account manager is to project manage. And with the team, sometimes there is follow-up that's needed because everyone's busy, everyone has things going on, and sometimes you do need to ask someone for something if they don't provide it to you right away. But if the team is providing regular updates on what's going on, then that makes my job with communication much easier, spends less time following up, which of course then saves more time for anything else that needs to be done for the client, which is really great. So setting up automations like that to get updates from the team so that you're not always going and trying to pull this all manually saves a lot of time, especially for those clients that have a lower budget. That would be automatically what I would do. Now, there are some other clients that, have a lower spend but are more more needy, like they need more from you. And in those types of situations, there's a lot of uncomfortability with the amount of time that we're spending. And with other team members, of course, you have that feeling of this is how much they're paying us and this is how much my team can do, and that it's just not balancing out. So as an account manager, how do you manage that? Right? Like, how do you make sure that the team still feels inspired to do what they're doing? And it takes a lot of encouragement. It takes a lot of telling the team how great they're doing and just keeping the positivity very high around the account so that the team continues to give you those updates and puts the time into that. Because every account is important, and every person is important to get an update to. So we have our regular cadence. Like you said, some clients don't need a lot of feedback or information or updates. They just want to know what's going on. So it's usually a high level. This is what's going on. These are the things that we need from you. Is there anything that you need from us? And those clients usually don't have, a semi-regular meeting with us. It's usually like monthly or every other month, or sometimes even quarterly, just depending on what the client needs and what we feel and the strategist feels is important to communicate with the client. And if things change, then, we do we can upsell you, no problem. We'd love to support you more because, like we said, the more we can support you, the better we can support you. But making sure that those clients that aren't regularly meeting with you, they need to be checked in on, and they need to make sure that, or you need to make sure, that they know what's going on in their account, because regardless of their ad spend, they're still spending money and they need to know where it's going and what it's doing.
So Jenna, do you have any other quick tips for effective client communication?
I would say two things. One, read the room, right? Sometimes you can't always be your bubbly, sparkly self with every single client, and that's okay. Because there are some clients that you can be your bubbly self with. But definitely read the room. If you have some clients that you can't joke around with, then definitely don't joke around with them. If they're more serious, they don't put their camera on, follow suit, right? If what they're doing, you mirror. So that would also include emails. If you are more of a positive, bubbly person, you like to add emojis, maybe tone down the emojis if your client isn't really an emoji person. But don't dull your sparkle either. You make sure that you stay true to yourself too. And then the other thing I would probably say when it comes to client communication is to stay on top of it. Get ahead of it. I know we touched on this a little bit, but I think it warrants repeating. If something's happening or something might happen, you should communicate that with your client, because you don't want them coming to you being like, why are these ads disapproved? Right? Is my campaign not running? It's like, no, it's fine. Those aren't on. It's all right. Like communicating that when you know it. And it's not going to happen perfectly every time. So don't beat yourself up over missing something, because it's going to happen, because we're all humans. Not every single bit of this process is automated. We automate as much as we can, but there's still the human element. So things will be missed, but definitely don't wait on anything. If you hear something, communicate it. If something might be coming down the pipeline, communicate it. Over communication is never discouraged or unappreciated.
So as we start to wrap up, exciting, but you're getting married in a couple of weeks.
I know. It's crazy.
And would love if you could just share with us. I know you're deep in wedding planning. What's your top 3 things that you're looking forward to for the big day?
Oh, okay. So of course, number 1 is getting married. I've got the love of my life. We've known each other since we were in high school and found each other later in life. So we're just excited and smitten and so excited to just get married and spend the rest of our lives together. So that's the one thing that I'm most excited about. If nothing else happens and that's it, we just sign a piece of paper, then that's a successful wedding to me. The second thing I think is my dad walking me down the aisle. I think every little girl, feels that that's just a milestone moment to have my dad, and my dad's with me. So I'm blessed to have my dad on the day, and my mom and my whole family, and to be able to be there to support Logan and I on our very special day. So I'm excited for that. And then I'm just excited to relax after. To just find a hobby and just settle into married life and, this next chapter. I'm looking forward to everything that it has to offer.
Well, I'm so excited for you. It's going to be so special. And just thinking about where you live in Canada, I'm sure it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, in October with all the leaves changing, it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's something down in Texas we don't even know about. Leaves
changing.
The seasons. What is that? I don't even
what
know
are
what
seasons?
That is. No
it's
clue.
Hot.
So Jenna, where can listeners learn more about you or follow you if they have any questions?
Oh, well, you can follow me on, any social media platform. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Jenna Meldrum, that's where I'm at. But you can also see me on some other podcasts, Dot & Company, if you've heard of them, Client Account Management, the Happy Clients podcast. You can check me out there. I'm on a couple of those. And then otherwise, you'll see me rocking the Client Account Management life.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we'll definitely put some links to some of the other podcasts that you've been on.
Yeah.
Well, Jenna, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experiences with us today. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into the Digital Marketing Mentor. We'll talk with you next time. Thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Mentor podcast. Be sure to check us out online at thedmmentor.com and at the DM Mentor on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more Marketing Mentor magic. See you next time.